Welcome to the OERizona Podcast. We are honored to have two distinguished guests today, Dr. Doug Berry, Provost at Yavapai College in Prescott, Arizona, who brings extensive experience in academic leadership and innovation from his time not only at Yavapai, but Maricopa Community College and Paradise Valley Community College. Dr. Susan Wood, Vice President of Academics and Student Affairs at Eastern Arizona College, has a rich background in teaching, program administration, as well as executive leadership in institutions from New Mexico, Texas, and Massachusetts. Now we get to talk about administrative advice and guidance, all things OER. So welcome both Doug and Susan to the OERizona Podcast. Appreciate you having you in the podcast today.
Thank you, Dr. Klein.
Thank you, Nathan.
You're welcome. So we're going to start with institutional strategies. And so we'll start, Susan, with you first, and then Doug. Let's first talk about how your institutions implemented OER, Open Educational Resources, and supported the adoption of OER materials among faculty. And how did you engage faculty? How did you encourage them to get started?
Thank you for that question. The impetus for starting OER at EAC really came about because of the grant. When I first arrived here a few years ago, this was up and coming from New Mexico. I knew about OER. I had spearheaded some initiatives at past institutions, and I knew the value. And so here at Eastern Arizona College, one of the first things that we realized is that for this to take hold, we really needed faculty buy-in, and that means led by faculty. So we designated a lead faculty who would kind of guide the OER initiative and keep OER visible in faculty meetings. We also established faculty mentor, course designer. So we had that kind of scaffolding and support services to support the OER adaptation and creation. Let's see what else. We also encouraged faculty to go to trainings, which I think, conferences, that sort of thing, meetings where they could meet with other lead faculty or other faculty who are using OER and collaborate. We also here at EAC, we came up with kind of a design for a video recording studio to create OER multimedia resources, which I think was really beneficial. And then when faculty did something really cool, we made sure that we could showcase what it is that they did, little positive peer pressure. And then I would say the last thing that we did is we really involved experts. So we've got just fantastic director of library services who knows about OER. We engaged her and her staff to help the faculty.
Sounds like some incredible things there at Eastern are happening. And tomorrow marks my 1-year anniversary at Yavapai College, so I'm still relatively new. But as I joined YC, I was very excited to see the work that had already happened with OER. They chose a quality initiative through the Higher Learning Commission to really follow student success using OER materials. And of course, the grant that Megan Crossfield runs here was significant in supporting that work. But they had over 108 faculty involved in training for those courses, adjunct full-time faculty, and moving to OER outcomes, and built over 65, 67 courses at that time with OER materials. And in doing that, so there were stipends for faculty through the grant, but then also the instructional designers through the Center for Teaching and Learning, or TELS, here at YC, were instrumental in supporting faculty in that work. And I also believe, much as Susan said, there are some other faculty who are helping faculty, almost a train the trainer model of best practices and what's going on in their classes that they can then move into other disciplines. At my previous institutions in Maricopa, we often had faculty committees who were evaluating requests to move courses into OER, whether that was in person or online, if it was 16-week or a reduced duration, 8, 12-week courses. And then we would do very similar work in supporting faculty through that development and the Centers for Teaching and Learning with instructional designers. We'd have other experienced faculty present during our Learning Week sessions on the good work that was happening in OER. And then in every institution I've been in within the library, there have been significant supports for OER materials, whether it's a full-time staff person totally dedicated to OER development, or a number of different staff who designate their time to support faculty in that development. So it really does, in my opinion, have to be an all-in effort across the institution to support students and the faculty as they go to this OER material.
I think Susan and I would agree in saying that much of the work that was done at Yavapai, Doug, was very instrumental in getting us forward here at Eastern moving. The work that Megan Crossfield has done was a big help to us, me personally.
Huge.
So let's talk about its impact for a minute. Is there evidence? Have we seen evidence of its benefit to students? Do you have any numbers for us? Is there specific examples where are data available that might indicate how OER has benefited us? Doug, let's start with you on that one.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we always point out, regardless if it's at Maricopa or here at YC, is the dollar amount that we're saving students with textbook costs. Students, through various surveys at, again, different institutions I've been at, including YC, indicate that textbook costs can sometimes be a barrier to not only enrolling in multiple courses, but just going back to college. And so by removing those textbook costs, we are now giving students a pathway to their academic or career advancement that they thought was maybe unattainable in the past. And I don't have specific numbers from Maricopa, but I know we're talking millions of dollars saved by switching to OER materials. And at YC, up to 2022, we were over $800,000 for students that we saved. So 2 years, almost 3 years later, I'm sure we've saved students over $1 million at YC in textbook costs alone. In addition to that is also student success and advancement. Some of the research that we collected for our quality initiative that talked about the perceptions of OER classes, 88% of students said that those classes were well organized, easy to follow, materials were high quality, relevant, and up to date. 87% said that not having a textbook made a significant difference in their lives because they could spend that money on other needs, whether that was for academics or putting food on the table. And then what do we have here? About 60% said that purchasing textbooks were financially difficult. So 6 out of 10 students had to consider, can I purchase this textbook? Should I go to college, or do I have to wait until I have more money available? So I think we're making significant strides to providing access to students who may have thought college, again, was unattainable, but now through the work of OER, the good work of our faculty, our librarians and staff, they are now in school making a difference.
Great. Thanks. Susan?
Doug, I'm going to just riff off of what you've said. I don't want to necessarily repeat, because we've had the same sort of outcomes in terms of saving money. Up to $100,000 saved, savings to students that we've had here at Eastern Arizona College. So equity and access are absolutely at the forefront. I want to add to that I think one of the real benefits is that students have access because they don't have costs. They have access from day one. Mm-hmm. That makes a huge difference in terms of retention. The students are not going to fall behind. And that's one of the problems that a student may have, even if they've got financial aid that would pay for a textbook eventually. They don't have access to it from day one. And then those who can't afford it, they're making photocopies of their friends, of their, it doesn't work. It's not sustainable if a student doesn't have the materials right from the start. So given the way that it allows students to be able to financially afford it and to have materials from day one, I think has a couple of benefits. One, it improves retention, persistence, completion. I think it also improves, and it's not I who say this, it's the faculty, that it improves engagement. Because students have the materials, they're participating in the class. And I would also say that our faculty have observed that the environment is more inclusive, and that then students they're on the same footing in terms of being successful and being able to participate, engage, do well on exams and quizzes.
And you mentioned persistence, Susan, and we do have some statistics that show students are enrolling in almost 3 credits additional each semester when they have OER material. So that's almost equivalent to taking another class and reducing their time to completion, which is critical for our students.
That's amazing. Nathan will have to do a little bit of research on that. If those students are taking more credits, that's a data point that I hadn't thought of collecting. Thank you, Doug.
Absolutely. And as a professor, I can definitely verify that students really appreciate, and I appreciate as a professor, being able to have courses ready to go, materials ready to go on day one. So I totally agree with that. So let's talk about, success is great, but no success comes without challenges, right? And so what were some of the challenges that you've faced implementing OER, and maybe how did you overcome those? Susan, let's start with you on this one.
Thank you, Nathan. Great question. I think that you hinted at the beginning that we learned a lot from Yavapai. And so I want to just start by saying that one of our challenges was that it wasn't our brainchild. And so we came to it having to convince faculty that this is something that was worth investigating. I think probably Doug at Yavapai, it was the brainchild of Yavapai. So they already had faculty who were they had the buy-in. So I would say that our first challenge was getting buy-in from faculty and getting them to see the value and wanting to participate. And that's fine. If that's where we start, great. Let's educate the faculty on what OER is. And we spend a lot of time educating them on not only the value, but what it is, and helping them to understand that they don't have to start from scratch, that there is OER creation, but there's also OER adoption, right? There's lots of different on-ramps into OER. And I think that that's a challenge that we have overcome, but we did have to start there. Nathan came into his position as kind of our lead faculty a little bit later and has just been a rock star in helping faculty learn and understand the value. So I would say that was probably our first challenge. And then we realized that we needed to have those mentors. We needed to have the instructional designers. We are in rural Arizona. It's hard to find instructional designers. And so hiring and getting those qualified folks to help the faculty, that was tough, but we found a wonderful person who has helped us with that. So I think the challenge was building that positive environment, educating the faculty, and finding the right people to move that project forward. I would say that those were the challenges that we have faced and overcome. Doug, what about you?
Yeah, I think there's probably some similarities there as well. And anytime we're doing significant change, usually we start with the willing, those faculty who are interested in being innovative and trying something different. And then we move into areas of where we know this would be best for students. How can we get more people on board? I think one of the concerns I heard from faculty as we first dabbled in OER was about copyright infringement. What can I do? What can't I do? In this space. And I think that's why it's so important to have the librarians, the instructional designers, other experts really supporting faculty as they go through this work. The other space that I think has always been a challenge, but we're working through it, is with adjunct faculty. And so, of course, full-time faculty, they have, their careers to create classes, and they're doing a lot around the college beyond just teaching in the classroom, but they really have an opportunity to focus in on course creation and development. Whereas our adjunct faculty are typically professionals in the field who are willing to almost donate their time for the small pay that we can provide them to create course materials. And so we found it very helpful to have course shells for adjunct faculty, as you said, really adoption of what's already out there and then making it their own, which sometimes has put us in a place. I know at multiple institutions, we've talked about intellectual property rights when it comes to OER materials and who owns this if I create it for the college and vice versa. So, but I think those are all challenges that we've worked through and we continue to grow. We've put OER materials is one of our key priorities and strategic priorities for the institution at YC. And so we are constantly working on that metric to improve it and grow it. And I'm really proud of the work that's already happened here at YC. And I know we are continuing to develop more OER courses because of the benefits that it has for students and faculty.
So, Doug, one of the things that I've heard about Yavapai that I'm impressed with is that it's part of your strategic plan. Can you speak to that for a moment?
Yeah, I'll do the best I can. As again, still relatively new, but I know our strategic planning committee here at YC is not just a group that creates a strategic plan to put on the shelf and then 5 years later goes back and creates a new strategic plan. It is an active participatory group. And so they meet weekly in the fall semester to look at our current strategic priorities, read trends throughout higher education, understand what's happening in the state of Arizona and the Western region, and then develop either new key metrics or priorities and that's sent up to the ELT, executive leadership team, where we then vet those key priorities and outcomes and metrics and send it back to the group for approval. And so OER absolutely fits in one of our 4 pillars of delivery. It also fits in affordability. And so it was, I think, easy for the team at the time to accept the addition or increase in OER materials as one of our key strategic priorities. Not only that's going to help our students, but help the community and provide access to students who otherwise wouldn't have it. As we've created some of our new programs, like our baccalaureate program in business, and that is exclusively in 8 weeks, with the exception of our internship, and also OER. So we started that program from the beginning, knowing it was going to be OER, which is easy to point to when it's one of your strategic priorities. So this is where we want to go. And of course, the faculty have done a tremendous job in putting those courses together.
Well, you've both mentioned innovations that both of your institutions have brought that have come about because of open educational resources. The video recording studio that we have, we call it the Creation Station, Susan mentioned earlier. And then you just mentioned one of your programs that sounds pretty innovative as well. Are there any other innovations that have come about because of open educational resources that you'd like to mention?
I'll go first on that, Nathan, and I'm going to just brag on you for a moment. So Nathan is one of our innovators here at EAC. He, along with another faculty member from our communicative arts program, Jacob Lauritsen, have really found a nice connection between AI and OER. So, for example, Jacob uses AI as a brainstorming tool in written communication course, and it helps students to generate and refine ideas, and that doesn't cost anything. Nathan has used AI to support tutoring in biostatistics, brainstorming solutions for environmental issues, simulating research as practice before real world application. That's hard to say. And so really it's that intersection between AI and OER that is just an absolute natural fit. You know, Doug, you and I are both, our institutions are members of AFIT, and I see a connection there of being able to say, well, OER is right up there with being innovative, and how can we leverage AR, AI, and VR, and some of these other technologies to support OER creation, development, adoption, and adaption. What would you add to that, Doug?
Yeah, I totally agree about being a member institution to AFIT. I think our president here, Dr. Ryan, has created a space for innovation. So not just within OER, but, you know, when you have somebody at the top saying, we want to know what's next. She says, well, you know, what's the next practice, not the best practice. We're already doing the best practice. We want to move into the next practice. And so I think OER was a part of that. We have our Center for Learning and Innovation. We just opened on the east side of Yavapai County over in the Verde Valley, and it has a podcasting studio. It has virtual reality headsets, mixed reality headsets, and we'll be opening our larger Center for Learning and Innovation here in Prescott in January of 26. And so we're really excited about that. I was just talking with Robin Bryce, who is leading a lot of those efforts around innovation. And one of the cool things we're going to have is an igloo room. And maybe you've seen or heard of this, but essentially it is a giant room which will be 360 degrees of immersive reality. And so you no longer have to wear headsets or goggles in this space. It will populate an environment for you and you are in it. So think about all the cool things faculty will be able to do with their students, and the way we'll be able to broadcast presentations in this igloo space. And so we're really excited about putting structures in place that allow faculty and staff to dream and do different things. So just because it's the way it has been done in the past, that's not necessarily the way we want to do it in the future. And I think our faculty and staff have really latched onto that excitement about being creative. And I also think we're helping prepare students for those next jobs that we don't even know exist. I mean, you mentioned AI, and I think we're just at the beginning of that, even though it's been around for a long time. If we're not teaching students how to ethically use AI in the workplace, at home, I think we're missing out. And so I'm so glad our faculty and staff here have kind of jumped in and said, well, what can we learn next about it? And that our president's been in a space to support all those efforts. So those are some of the exciting things I know we have coming down the pipeline at YC. And I'm looking forward to, in a year from now, getting ready to launch that new center and rolling out some programs that we haven't even thought about yet. But we're excited to do that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Susan.
Well, I was just going to say, I agree. We don't know what the jobs are out there. So I think engaging faculty and students is so important. In addition to that, I would add the community. Mm-hmm. To engage, what is it that our local hospitals are doing, that our local businesses are doing. Sometimes they're ahead of us, and sometimes they look to us for leadership. And so I agree with you, Doug. We need to be positioned to support and advocate for innovation.
Absolutely. I'm definitely stopping by your innovation center next time I'm up in Prescott.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Let's talk equity for a minute. We've already mentioned it, day one access. Is there anything else that you would like to say specifically about equity? Let's see. Barry, go ahead.
Yeah, I can jump in there. And certainly we're open access institution, and we've talked about how we've removed barriers of cost. And to Susan's point about from day one, students are prepared in the classroom. They're not waiting for financial aid to come in and purchase a textbook or an online material resource. But I also think it gives faculty the availability to create culturally relevant pedagogy and update information in their classroom at the speed of change. And so we can be at the forefront of some of the societal issues that are taking place in our own communities or across the states or across the globe, in a space that if you're using a textbook, you're always waiting for that next edition, which may or may not be coming out in a year or 2 years, and then at an additional cost. And so there's just so many different ways you can integrate images or videos or the latest research into an OER class that you simply can't do if you're always waiting on publisher material. So I think it's a great space to expand equity and inclusion in our classrooms.
And I would add to that, Doug, the idea that we are very rural means that lots of textbooks don't understand rural students, that rural student body. We're a Hispanic serving institution. We have a large Native American population. We have international students because of our sports teams. And so to your point, an instructor can very quickly adapt materials that will be, as you said, culturally relevant to the students in their class. So I think that's huge, because the fact is that we know that students respond well when teachers look like them, but that doesn't always happen. But if we can have materials that speak to their lived experience, we are that much ahead of the game, and we can engage those students, and they will engage in the classroom and participate. So I think, yes, equity in terms of cost is important, and accessibility, but the cultural relevance piece cannot be, it's just huge, cannot be overstated. I would also add to that I just want to say again that bring in your librarians, just as you've said, because the librarians are the ones, if you know that you want your material to be culturally relevant, but you don't know where to find it, collaborate with your colleagues, but collaborate with your librarian and their staff, because I tell you, they are the ones who can find materials. Faculty do not need to feel like they're doing this on their own, because I think that's where they stop and say, this is too big. This is too big for me. But if they know that they've got a support system, some scaffolding that will help them to collate and curate the right kind of material, then I think we can hook them.
And just to piggyback off that, as we're assessing student learning, and we're hoping that we are giving our students a general education in most of our colleges and universities, in addition to their very technical or specific academic skills. At times, we may not feel like there's course material that a publisher gives us that hits on some of our metrics or outcomes that we'd like to measure. And when you build a class from scratch using materials that a team has helped you put together, you can intentionally build materials that help reach that outcome and can assess student learning and help us get to that outcome of a generally educated graduate or transfer student when they leave our institutions.
I'm glad you used the word intentional.
Yeah.
That's what it takes.
So I can tell you that, speaking both of AI and equity, that there are professors who are actively translating materials into other languages because we have ESL students, English as a second language students, who they just are really struggling with the English in their class. And so exams and even some materials are actively getting translated right now. And I think that's amazing that can happen in this day and age. Certainly wouldn't have happened when we were in school, but so that's amazing. So let's, you mentioned collaboration, Susan, and I wanted to just reiterate that. It just so happens that our episode 4 podcast was with Andrea Shaban, I believe, math instructor at Yavapai. And she talked to me about collaboration. So I'd encourage our listeners to go listen to that. It was amazing. She's got some great advice on collaboration. Let's wind this up by talking about future directions. So what do you see as the next steps? So we're winding down the Rural Arizona grant. What are the next steps for institutions in Arizona to keep the progress going with open educational materials? Susan or Doug, either one.
Well, I would just reiterate that we as institutional leaders, that we've got to keep this on the front burner, that we want to institutionalize some of the progress that we've made and the way that we support faculty. So we've got to continue to educate the faculty. New faculty who come in, we need to make sure that they understand the value of OER. We need to support that. And Doug, it sounds like at Yavapai, you've created these physical spaces to support it. We've done some of the same. I'm a little bit jealous we don't have an igloo room, but we do have, under Nathan's leadership, we do have a space where recordings can be done and work can be done professionally. We've got the Center for Teaching and Learning and a fabulous director there. So it is making sure that we've got the staff who can continue to move this project forward. And that's always the danger with grants, right? They leave and the project kind of fizzles. And so we've got to make sure that we keep it on the forefront because of the value that we've seen throughout the lifetime of this grant. And then I would say that we specifically at Eastern will use that institutional membership in AFIT to see what's the next thing. We have created, and Nathan's a part of this, we call it the WIN Society, UN Society, and that stands for What's Next Society. And there's a group of us who meet to talk about what is the next innovative project that we might undertake. But we don't want to just keep doing new things. We want to make sure that what we're doing right now is sustainable and that it continues, but that it's iterative. So what we do with OER today, we want there to be vision of what it looks like tomorrow, and it won't be what it looks like today. It's going to be something new. But for that to happen, we've got to have the institutional support and the staff to make sure that it happens.
Yeah, I think key word there is sustainable. And we've been fortunate to be able to support faculty in a financial way for creating and modifying and updating OER classes. And with the grant coming to an end, the question for us is, where do we find, if we do find similar monies or comparable funds to support faculty in this continued effort? Because we know it will be a continued effort. We're fortunate to have some really good legislative relationships And I know we're working on a meeting with the governor's office to see, is there a space in the Arizona state budget to support community colleges and these OER efforts? It's taken place in other states where there is funding specifically for colleges and universities to develop OER materials, cost-effective materials for students. And I know Governor Hobbs is a former educator. She was one of our social work faculty at Paradise Valley when I was there for a brief time. And so hopefully we can find space to continue supporting faculty and have some state funding behind us and not just rely on grant funding, which, as you talked about, is not always going to be there. And so we're looking for those innovative efforts to continue that moving forward. And I think OER is going to keep looking different, particularly with AI. We're going to see labs, we're going to see other things in the sciences and technology come through that'll be cost effective. But I think if you can build the culture at your college, which sounds like it's happening at Eastern, and I feel like it's happening here at YC, having that culture of innovation is what's going to be most important for sustainability.
Nathan, I'd like to just take the opportunity to add to that. Doug, I have so enjoyed collaborating and working with you, our conversations that we have with some of our other colleagues, but just you and I, and knowing that I've got this support at YC, and I hope you feel that from me, because I do think that collaboration and that positive peer pressure, I think that's really useful for us to be able to go back to our institutions and say, well, this is what YC's doing, and this is what Eastern's doing. Can we go and can we take a field trip and see what YC is doing, and invite YC here to see what it is that we're doing. It's just, let's not do things in a vacuum, and let's support each other. I think that that's going to be important.
Yeah, I'd certainly echo that sentiment. I think you were the first statewide colleague to welcome me into this position about a year ago. So our conversations have been so helpful, even though we're very far apart. Our issues are somewhat very similar from time to time. And so our solutions are also similar. And as long as we're talking and working together, we can find ways to move forward in different spaces. And I think the collaborative voice at the state level when we're trying to make some of these things go forward or happen for our students is more powerful than if it's just one college who's voicing a concern or a need. So yeah, I very much have appreciated our relationship and working together and the support you've provided.
Well, thank you, both of you, for your time today. I know you're very busy, and so I appreciate it. And I just want to encourage our listeners to follow us on our YouTube channel at OERizona, OERizona, our channel, and also in LinkedIn. We have an account there as well, so you can find us on LinkedIn and also on Spotify if you like to use Spotify. If there is, do you have any further comments that you'd like to say?
Just thank you very much, Nathan. I've appreciated this time and this discussion. I know you're doing great work and getting the voice out there about OER. So I appreciate your work and effort in all this as well.
Agreed.
Okay, thanks. Have a good day.
All right.